As the Gaza ceasefire enters its second day, Israel has released 90 Palestinian prisoners following the return of 3 Israeli hostages to their families. A further 4 Israeli hostages are expected to be released this week, but the future of the ceasefire remains fragile as Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that Israel is ready to resume the war if the second phase fails. The reaction to the ceasefire, we've seen in Israel there is much joy at the release of 3 hostages, but it's 3 of 94?
94 are still remaining
in Gaza. A long way to go.
And we don't know their conditions. Hamas has not disclosed if they are alive, in what situation they are. And we've seen them. You mentioned that the deal is fragile, and I'll agree that it's very fragile, but because of Hamas, we've already seen yesterday, the first day of when the agreement came into force, and they already broke it when they didn't disclose the names of the hostages that will be released, and we see them again trying to manipulate and change the agreement. So this is worrying for all of us.
Well, the delay in the names coming through, obviously people were making some decisions as to who would be released in this first phase, and the condition of people, the age of people and so on. It's understandable that there might be a slight delay, and yet we saw the reaction of Prime Minister Netanyahu was to order some sort of bombardment which took the lives of 8 people and injured many more.
One is not connected.
It seemed like a peevish thing to do.
One is not connected to the other. I'll reject that.
But why was it not connected? Because he said we're going to continue because Hamas has
the agreement has not came into force, because Hamas was still prolonging it and not agreeing to the different conditions of the agreement. And we've seen all throughout these months, we've seen the first hostage deals that were broken by Hamas already in late November, beginning of December of last year. And we've seen since then that time and time again they have dismissed, violated the different agreements. And it's not us, and it's not just Israelis saying that. You've seen the Americans, the current administration, who was very involved in the negotiations, say that it is up to Hamas's responsibility that there wasn't a deal until now.
It does seem, though, to me, a peevish reaction, from Netanyahu. Okay, you haven't given us the names, you tell us they're coming, but since they're not coming and they're not forthcoming now, we will kill more people. And that's what happened.
No, it's not what happened. What happens is that what we are dealing with is a genocidal, suicidal, brutal, cynical organization. And I've proved that time and time again. Even I look at this horrible photo, and I'll try to describe it. This is Doron, which was released from hostage after 469 days that she was hostage, and she's surrounded by a sea of terrorists, of Hamas terrorists, and then thousands of an angry mob just looking at her until the last moment. They are using this psychological war. They're treating her like that until the last moment. You see the Red Cross agent not even trying to help her. I think this is the first time she probably seen the Red Cross, because they have not visited the hostages since they were kidnapped.
Were they able to? That's the question.
But did the Red Cross issue any statement saying that? Did the UN issue any statement calling on access?
Are you saying Israel would have facilitated Red Cross visitations to the hostages?
It's not up to Israel. Hamas needed to do it. And it's up to the international community. We have, for the conditions of prisoners in Israel are much different than the conditions of civilian hostages that were kidnapped. The fact that even if I look at the media, when we talk about the biased media, historic hostage swap, one of the papers here in Ireland says
that
this is not a hostage swap. One are terrorists, prisoners convicted in attempted murder. And these 90 prisoners that were released yesterday, and you've played the joyous moments in the West Bank and in Gaza. These are terrorists. These are people who, let's say, they're allegedly minor crimes because they only attempted murder. So how will the reaction in the streets of Ireland will be if 90 prisoners would have been released back into the ability of taking out more terror attacks?
Are most of them not minors, underage? Are most of them not women? Isn't that the situation?
But they are still terrorists. If you look at the crimes that each of them made, These are harsh terrorism crime. This is incitement for terrorism. So these are things that also by Irish law would have been convicted.
Now, you've shown me a picture on the front of one of the tabloids. I'll show you the picture on the front of the Irish Times. And this is what Israel has done to Gaza. And it's absolutely shocking. This is like worse than the remnants of German cities after World War II.
Again, that comparison, I will reject that.
I mean, what
completely.
do you see there? There isn't a building
here,
standing.
This is what Hamas has done to Gaza. And the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, said it yesterday. We need to remember who is responsible for this war, who is responsible for the situation that Gaza is in. All of this could have been avoided, not just on October 7th, but every day since then. And I don't want to get into, for 15 months, I've been talking here to the Irish media, to Irish politicians, and I think we are so caught up in the same echo chamber of the narrative, the binary way that Ireland is seeing things. And what I ask you is to zoom out, because that understanding, we see it more and more countries, the understanding that Hamas is a shared threat that we need to fight. Understanding that as long as Hamas controls Gaza, not just Israelis are under threat, but the Palestinians in Gaza are under threat. Now, the Palestinian Authority does not want Hamas.
The criticism of Israel has been the manner of how it conducted its response to the events of October the 7th. A State Department report said Israel was losing support over its indiscriminate bombing of the Strip. And Donald Trump, in an interview with an Israeli newspaper, said Israel is losing a lot of support over its handling of the war. I think Israel made a very big mistake, said Trump, creating a very bad picture for the world. So you've got two different opposing political figures in the United States saying the same thing.
We all agree that the situation in Gaza is tragic. I don't think there are questions about that. And we are working closely with the United States and with different allies to make sure that, one, the threat of Hamas is eliminated, and two, that the people of Gaza get the help and aid that they need. And we do that with that help of those important allies. There is a way to help. There is a way to be supportive and productive while still being critical. We don't dismiss that criticism. We still remind everybody that we operate under the rules of war, under the international law.
But again and again, you've told me you have Israel has no beef with the non-combatants, the ordinary women and children, and indeed men, who are not bearing arms against Israel. And yet, the decimation of their homes, the destruction of their cities, their hospitals, it's making life virtually unlivable for people. People going back to their homes will find they simply are not there. There may be bodies under the rubble. That is like, on the front of the Irish Times, it's like a doomsday picture.
Well, again, I remind you, why is this happening? How do we stop it? And all roads lead to Hamas. If they still remain in power with their cynical way, we know how embedded they are in populations. And when I say these things, I hope that the people listening understand what we're talking about, the complete infiltration of all civilian infrastructure. So that is hospitals, that is buildings, schools, mosques. There is no place that is sacred for them not to infiltrate. So you are fighting an enemy that has embedded itself in its population because they don't value their lives.
What is the moral equation where you, Israel, are prepared to take the lives of non-combatants simply because there's a Hamas representative embedded in some way? I mean, how justifiable is it to say we will kill 20 ordinary people to get one Hamas commander? Does that have any logic or any moral justification?
But again, I think what you're looking at it in a very binary, simplistic way. We operate under the rules of law and under the international law in order to make sure that all of the different targets are viewed and analyzed beforehand, because we are fighting an impossible enemy. But what you're forgetting when you say that, and you're falling into the trap of Hamas, because they already said that they're infiltrating the numbers. They already said that they don't include in the numbers they don't define them as the terrorists who were killed. We already said, and we've already seen that they infiltrate the numbers of women and children. So all of it is cynical, and we are sitting here discussing it. Well, that's the trap that they want us to get into. So I'm asking you to stop this. I mean, it's not a tit for tat. This is an impossible situation. The situation in Gaza is impossible for us and for the people of Gaza. How do we stop it?
Is it a war, given the massive destruction of Gaza that has taken place by Israel? Is it a war that's possible to win? Because, as you say yourself, the Hamas, they were visible there bearing guns as the hostages were being handed over to the Red Cross. It's quite clear that Israel has not effectively demolished Hamas.
I'll just
so does it mean that this is doomed from the very beginning?
But we didn't want this war. We didn't start this war. This could all have ended. And I don't think, personally, I don't think that there are any winners in a war. This has brought only tragedy and heartbreak to all of us. And we live it daily in Israel. The Palestinians in Gaza are living it. And when people here in Ireland talk about it, and I understand that the Middle East is one of the most important topics on the Irish foreign affairs agenda, to a point that it's a bit disproportionate. I would think that when politicians discuss it, they don't really convey the sentiments of the public. I think people in Ireland are concerned about housing, about the cost of living, about education, about healthcare. But putting all of that aside, if you do want to be a relevant, legitimate actor in the international sphere talking about the Middle East, you need to look at the whole picture. And you need to understand Hamas' responsibility. And you need to understand that this cycle of violence, this attack after attack perpetuated by Hamas, will not end as long as the international community and countries like Ireland are not holding and condemning Hamas clearly. If I look at the program for the next government, I don't see any concrete actions. All I see is punitive measures against Israel. And you ask why we think that Ireland is so obsessed with Israel. I don't know, but we see it repeatedly. There is no mention of the Palestinian Authority.
Back to my question, though. Do you think this ceasefire is doomed, given what you've observed about Hamas being embedded?
I think that if the international community does not help us in making sure that Hamas holds their end of the agreement, then we will see what happened in the past. And it is an ongoing violation of the different agreements. So we need the international community, we need Ireland to be vocal against Hamas. This is not an equation. This is not a hostage swap. This is a very cynical situation. We would ask a country that has known terror, that has known fighting, to stand up against this. I am disappointed and frustrated that here in Ireland, we were not able to break this echo chamber against Israel. We were not able to break this narrative, this very binary view on a very complex situation.
Isn't it probably the truth that it would suit Benjamin Netanyahu to continue the war? That he has not had the absolute victory over Hamas that he sought, and it was with the intervention of Donald Trump on the Blinken-Biden plan that forced a ceasefire?
I think these are just provocative questions that we're asking. I'll tell you, as an Israeli citizen, not just as an Israeli diplomat, we want to live. We want to make sure that the children, our families, can live securely. I think this is the minimum that you expect from your government. We want our hostages back. There are still 94 people there that we don't know their conditions. So what we want, I don't think it's a big ask. And I think the people of Ireland who have been through so many things understand that. We want to live. We want to make sure that our neighbors want to live more than they want to kill us. And this is such a cynical situation right now that instead of talking about that, instead about talking of how do we actually live security in our region, we are focusing on different narratives and accusations and conspiracy theories. I'm asking the people listening at home, what would you want your government to do in order to make sure that your family is safe?